Welcome, everybody. My name is Dan Vividelli, and I lead the measurement team here at InfoTrust. The measurement team is comprised of experts in data collection, engineering, dashboarding, and analysis in Google Analytics. Today, Vika, who is on my team, will be presenting on GA4 attribution. Vika has deep expertise in Google Analytics and specializes in app measurement. So we're excited to have her. She also happens to speak 4 different languages, loves to travel, and has been to 15 different countries. But I hear she's going to make it to 20 by the end of the year. So excited to hear about those travels. Oh, and in her spare time, she also codes apps in iOS. In today's session, we'll be walking through key differences in GA4 and Universal Analytics marketing attribution, differences in scope for traffic and implications for reporting metrics. We also have a follow-up session in the next couple of weeks to dig deeper into specific use cases and some known bugs. Early next week, when we have a chance to share the recording and recap of today's session, we will also include a link to that future session so you can easily register and share it with your colleagues. Now, a little bit about InfoTrust. InfoTrust is a privacy-centric digital analytics solution company that empowers marketers to make confident, data-driven decisions. Working with many of the world's best-known brands, InfoTrust partners with enterprise organizations in the CPG, retail, media, and finance spaces. We are a certified GMP and Google Cloud sales partner with offices spread across 3 continents to best serve our global partners. The growing team at InfoTrust is committed to building a best-in-class workplace and impacting communities around the world, all while accelerating the transition to a privacy-centric marketing world. And with that, I'll turn it over to Vika to take it away.
Thank you so much, Dan. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be your presenter today. Let's get into that right away. So today, conversions often happen after people interact with the website or apps multiple times. And attribution overall determines the role of each touchpoint in driving conversion and assigns credits sales to interactions in conversion passes. With Google moving away from Universal Analytics, it is essential to understand how attribution works in Google Analytics 4, including what is new, what is missing, and what it could mean for you as a marketers. Before we delve into the specifics, let's address the primarily distinctions between the metrics utilized in GA4 versus Analytics Universal. It is important to note there might be variations in the data due to the differences in how the key metrics are defined in both tools. A significant contrast is what while GA4 includes total user metric count, its primarily focus is on the active user count, which are represented as engaged users within a specific time frame. Additionally, GA4 adjusts user count based on user ID, Google Signals for cross-device tracking, and of course, based on the reporting identity option that you choose for your GA4 in your GA4 property settings. In contrast, Universal Analytics relies, Universal Analytics relies on the device ID alone. And as a result, GA4 may occasionally display a lower user count compared to Universal Analytics. So this is something that you should keep in mind. In GA4, screen views and page views are combined into the single metric named views, whereas in Universal Analytics, page views and screen views are typically segregated, with the latter commonly be found in Google Analytics views for apps. There's also been a notable change in how sessions are defined in GA4, and this is something really need to be highlighted here. While the exact calculation methods may not be fully disclosed by Google, several criteria we see are now considered. The first thing is that Google measures session start events, which are necessary to ensure that the session source is accurately passed into the GA4. Sessions no longer reset at midnight, as was the case in Universal Analytics. And unlike in Universal Analytics, newly introduced campaigns mid-session doesn't generate a new session. So with an updated session tracking in GA4, we anticipate that session count will be more accurate in GA4 rather than universal analytics. And regarding the observed differences, we notice the variances of around 20 and 10% respectively in user count and session counts when comparing UA to GA4 data. Furthermore, in GA4, unique metrics can now be combined with page and event metrics, providing more comprehensive insights. This is something that was a little bit lacking in universal analytics. It's worth mentioning that additionally, Google Analytics 4 can also process hits within a 72-hour window, whereas Universal Analytics operates within 4-hour window. This extended processing time in GA4 is useful for addressing situations where users log events with the lost connections. So something that also we need to keep in mind when we are trying to compare the data in Universal Analytics versus GA4. We would expect that GA4 will have more data just because of that specific heat limit. In GA4, conversions are also tracked differently compared to Universal Analytics. Every instance of the event is counted, whereas GA4 counts conversions per session. However, Google Analytics has provided the option to adjust the counting method in GA4 to count conversions per session as well. Additionally, GA4 introduces a new metric called engaged sessions and engagement rate. This introduces variances in differences between bounce rate calculations and session count. And I'm really apologize. It looks like there is a delay in how their slides are shared. So I just want to make sure that you see right now the right slide. We need to be right now on the metric differences for their with their conversions and engagement rate in it. And I really apologize. I think there was a slight delay on the slides from my end due to their connection issues. Let's go to the next slide and speak a little bit more about the scopes of traffic source dimensions. So GA4 has introduced 3 different acquisition data scopes compared to UA session scopes. So it is essential to know the differences between them. In GA4, the user scope remained fixed on the initial user source that brought the new user to the website or the app for the first time. This is an important consideration to remember when analyzing the user acquisition data and looking into that specific dimensions, because it will be always related to the first user. In GA4, acquisition dimensions begin with a prefix first user, which means the traffic dimension that starts with the first user, like first user source, medium, first user campaign, first user channel group is something that you will be looking into. Session scope attribution in GA4 is similar to Universal Analytics in some sense, and it determines the source of the session that initiated it, and it applies to the new and returning users. In GA4, session scope attribution dimension are prefixed with session. So in your GA4 data, you will see the dimensions such as session campaign, medium, source, and session default channel group. And it kind of directs you to know that this is the session scope dimension that you can utilize in your reports. Event scope dimensions don't include any prefixes. So in the GA4 data, you will see default channel group naming convention for the dimensions, which are kind of identified as event scope, as well as source, medium, and campaign will be also event scope dimensions. Really important note in here that GA4 employs various attribution models to attribute credit to different campaigns. For example, GA4 uses paid and organic channel last click attribution model, which is like a last non-direct click attribution model for first user and session scoped traffic dimensions. And because the user and session scope traffic dimensions operate with their own scope, which is last non-direct click, changes to their attribution model in the GA4 will not impact them. For event scope dimensions, GA4 uses the attribution model useSelect and by default in Google Analytics 4, it will be data-driven attribution model. And all reports with event scope traffic dimension reflect the attribution model you choose. Now let's see how the scopes affect the metrics. So indeed, due to the differences in traffic source scope in GA4, the attribution of key metric to these sources will be different. This can be illustrated in this comparison table, where you can see that the total count of metrics remains consistent from the first user to session attribution data. However, how Google Analytics GA4 attributes these metrics to different channels will definitely vary. For example, you can see that users, sessions, and purchase counts for affiliates in first user scope is lower compared to the session scope. And this is also true for the other channel groups too. And this is an expected behavior, as session scope dimension will always take in consideration also of returning users, while first user only focuses on the new users attribution. Now let's break down the scope differences with a real-time example. So this is something where it gets very interesting. Let's say we have a new user visited our site from the Facebook display. This user completed 2 conversions during this initial session, which is 2 form submissions. This new user journey can be illustrated in the table that you see on the right now. Because the user converted and we had 2 conversions during the first session, we will observe that conversions were attributed to the Facebook display across all 3 different traffic source scopes. Now let's consider a scenario where the user is actually introduced to another campaign. In our case, let's say it's YouTube video and it's changed mid-session. The key differences between Google Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics will be that Universal Analytics will generate a new session in such an instance, while GA4 will not. As a result, you can observe that the session count remains unchanged in the illustrated table below. This will also not reset the first user traffic source dimension, as it will always show the initial acquisition source medium. Similarly, the session traffic source dimension will remain the same, Facebook display, due to the rule that introducing a new campaign mid-session doesn't trigger a new session. Important note, it does not mean that Google is not considering the new session, new source medium mid-session. As you can see in the illustrated table below, YouTube video has appeared under event channel. So it didn't get lost, it just get attributed to a different scope. Now let's break down another example, and we also kind of delve in more into the mid-session scenario too. Let's assume that the user returns to the site via the bookmark after a few days and converts. In this scenario, one might expect that conversion would likely be attributed to direct none. However, in GA4 and Universal Analytics, Google always checks the last campaign details that were present within the selected lookback window when it comes to attribution. So if campaign details persisted in the past, Google will assign these campaign details to the session source medium. Hence, you will see that in our table, the session source medium in our example will be attributed to YouTube video this time, just because the previous time we had YouTube video as a new campaign that was introduced mid-session. And now let's break down another example. We have another example, interesting one. And In another scenario, let's assume we have a new user, completely new user that visited the site from Google CPC, but didn't convert. So since no conversions were recorded during the session, it is understandable that GA4 will not attribute any conversion for the first user and session default channel group. Interestingly, the event scope default channel group, which primarily focuses on conversion events per session, will not record Google CPC at all. And the reason for that, because the default channel group is recorded only if the session is associated with a conversion event. Like in our first example, although we don't really saw the conversion for the YouTube video mid-session, because the conversion was happening within one same session, we did see that default channel group recorded it in some way. In this scenario, if there is no conversions within the session, default channel group will not be recording any source and medium in your GA4 report. And this concludes actually today's presentation, our presentation session, and we have a small poll that you can answer. So feel free to give your answers right now. And once you complete, we will go back and continue our QA session that we still have some time to answer the questions for you.
Awesome. Wonderful presentation, Vika. Thank you for walking us through all that. We'll give everyone just a couple moments here to respond to the poll, and then I think we'll hop into some questions. So if you have any, please feel free to put those in, and we'll try to get those answered for you. Fantastic. Okay. All right. So we've got decent amount of responses here. Interestingly enough, it looks like different scopes of traffic dimensions are impacting results. That's the highest response. There's also some noted missing or new or different metrics that are impacting results, followed by reporting is pretty inconsistent. So hence this session and why we're all talking today, to understand better why and what, if anything, can be done. But I see we've got a couple of questions coming in. So the first one is, what if a user changes source and medium mid-session in GA4? What might happen in that instance, Vika?
Yeah, so the first example that I was actually showing in the user journey is one of the good examples on what really happens, and I'm more than happy to go back a little bit. So the one thing you need to note when it comes to the mid-session is that it will not generate, the mid-session campaign will introduce the mid-session will not generate a new session. And when it comes to the session source and medium, it's not going to be changed as well. However, if there was a conversion during that specific session in the user's journey, the default channel group will kind of inherit it. So there's a second table that you can see on the screen below. It's the good example what is really happening. The session source and medium and the first user source and medium did not really change with the mid-session campaign, but we do see a change on the default channel group level. Another note that, again, it's a little bit like a second slide. If users come back on the site and there is no UTM parameters, Google has an ability to look into the historical data for the campaign. And in this scenario, Google actually will select the UTM parameters that were introduced to, like, campaign parameters, not the UTM parameter, not all LCC UTM parameters, the campaign parameters that were actually introduced mid-session. So in this scenario, we had a conversion, and you can see that conversion was actually attributed to YouTube video, which was the last campaign that was introduced mid-session in the GA4. Hope that explains.
Awesome. Thank you, Vika. I think that was great. And then do we have any statistics on what % of hits come in after 24, 48, or 72 hours? I will also agree 3 days feels like a long time to be waiting for complete reporting. I don't know if you got a good answer there, but.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that ballpark right now, but probably it's something that we can look it up and try to compare. For us, it means that we will need to do some round of tests and see it. But yeah, like, unfortunately, I don't have an answer right now, like a definite answer, just because we didn't look into it, but we can take it in consideration and then share the finding with you if that will be okay with you.
Yeah. And I think results may vary. I can say anecdotally, just from my experience, we've seen them probably about an 80-20 split. So you'll get most of the data within the first 24 hours, but then see it continue to just change a little bit over time, that extra 20%. And we say 3 days because it may be closed out in 2, but sometimes we've noticed that even up to 3, it can change. That said, I think there's also an SLA that may be coming for BigQuery exports. So that can help on the reporting side as well once that arrives for enterprise customers. And let's see, can you talk about handling sessions that span midnight and how they're recorded in BigQuery export daily batch tables? How to avoid double counting these, say, in Looker reporting. And Vika, I don't know. Let me know if you're comfortable answering that, and if not, I might be able to fill in here
unfortunately, I'm not a Google BigQuery expert, so I cannot answer the Google BigQuery part of question. I can tell you how usually it is handled in the GA4. So GA4 is solely reliant on session start event, and this event session start is the one that it carries on the session source and medium, which is available. And we do see, and it's something that we're also going to be covering in the next session. We do see the instances when the users are actually staying on the site beyond the midnight. When they cross the midnight, because there is no session start, a new session start that is crossing the midnight time, sometimes Google is kind of not pass it on that session source and medium, just because it requires the session start technically to fire again. And hence, in a GA4, it is normal to see for the sessions that cross at midnight, it is normal to see not set for source and medium, and it would be attributed due to the fact how Google handles those midnight sessions. Hope that makes sense. More details we're going to cover during the next session. We kind of break down this instance into GA4 reporting in more details, and we can kind of provide you more input in there, but this is how it handles in GA4. When it comes to the Google BigQuery, I think we need to extend this question later on, so still stay tuned for the more kind of a detailed answer on it. Unfortunately, I cannot answer with a precision.
Yeah, I will say, to just add on to that, when they do span, it tends to be the difference of, less than probably 2% of all cases. So it tends to be more of an edge case. It's important to note, and I think if you can add an exception in your query, that's helpful, may clean things up a little bit. But also know that we do see differences between DUI reporting, generally due to sampling or cardinality. And so that fully processed data that you have in BigQuery, if you're doing that yourself, is going to really be more of your source of truth. And so you shouldn't expect that what you process in BigQuery matches exactly to the UI. That was true in Universal Analytics, and it's especially true for GA4. But we can dig into that a little bit more in our next session. And I think we have one last question that we can drop in here. We find, oh, we've got it. Are there custom conversion actions that can be created in GA4?
I would definitely appreciate the examples, but I think what it means that can we create some additional criteria for the conversion to count, for the event and conversion to count as a conversion. Yeah, there is a possibility to do so, but it's not really a recommended approach because it might impact on how your data will be attributed. So we are not really recommending that approach. Hope that makes sense.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we can ramp up there. So thanks everyone for the time today. We're right on schedule. And thank you, Vika, for presenting and sharing all this information. As a friendly reminder, we will be having another session in a couple of weeks to go into more use cases and do a deeper dive. We wanted to kind of set the playing field in today's session. So then in our next session, we can go even deeper into specific examples and different types of pain points that we know customers are working through right now. So with that, thank you all so much. Appreciate your attention, and we'll talk again soon.